We're about to start in a moment.
Hi, Barbara.
Yes, sir.
I'm putting this microphone just here. How is the sound going now?
It's okay. It's audible. Yeah, it's okay.
How is it now? Is it better?
Sabaral, would you like to test your audio?
Is it better now?
Audio is okay.
I think Anya was okay, no?
Yeah, it's okay. It could be a little louder, or maybe it's from me. Is it okay?
Or is it okay? Is it okay?
It's okay. It's okay. Yes.
Okay, then I'll go without the device in that case.
It's fine.
Barbara.
Yes, sir.
I'm
you're audible.
Yeah, can you see me?
Yes, very well.
Okay.
You're visible, audible, sir.
All right, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, done. Yeah.
A very good evening. A very good evening once again, and also a very good morning. I am Dr. Barbara S. Sangma, Head Department of English, Don Bosco College, Tura, convener of this international webinar and chairperson of this session. I welcome you all, dear and respected resource persons and participants from India and abroad, senior teachers, scholars, dear students, and my colleagues, to this national turned international webinar on Sajinma-Sagop pandemic, COVID-19 and culture. We are greatly privileged to have two very renowned resource persons. The first one being our dear and respected Professor K.C. Baral, retired professor from English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, and current Vice Chairman of Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies, Kolkata, under the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. The second resource person is a dear and respected Professor Jyotirmoy Pradhani, Department of English, Northeastern Hill University, writer, translator, social ideologist, social critic, and someone who I feel the Northeastern region can put its hope and trust in for the future. I'm also very happy to welcome you all that we have an efficient advisor to this webinar in the person of Father Vivan Rodriguez Mukim, Principal, Don Bosco College, Tura. We all know that the world, that the universe has become a global village. And this village is being plagued by illness and human life is being marauded. Life as it is being witnessed by us has a very uncanny way of getting at us. While we were talking about other things and preparing ourselves to meet other challenges, COVID-19 intruded into our lives. The world was going at a very high speed, and suddenly, to use the very Indian metaphor, a black cat crossed the road. And this jumbo speeding vehicle called Earth had to make a sudden stop, and we did skid, and the impact is disastrous. Now we are on a universal manhunt for this black cat to ensure that it does not cross our path again. There are other cats that might cross our path. Hopefully by then, we would have learned to take life in a little kindlier, in a little more leisurely way, and arrive at the spot long before or long after the cat had crossed our path. You know, when something goes wrong, our endeavor should be to find a remedy and not to find who was responsible for the wrong. It sounds cliche, but I know we do not mind joining the cliche mongers when it serves our purpose. So here we are in Don Bosco College trying to do our bit with this webinar on the Sajinma-Sagop pandemic, COVID-19 and culture theme. I think before everything else, I owe you an explanation vis-a-vis the use of the strange term and the phrase Sajinma-Sagop. It is a Achuk or Garo compound word. Allow me to say a line or two about the Garos or the Achuks in the first place. The Achuks or the Garos, the tribe to which I belong, is one of the three major tribes indigenous to the state of Meghalaya in the northeastern region of India. It is situated in one of the remotest parts of India in the borders of Bangladesh. Unfortunately, our region is very little known, even to the rest of the country of India. I thought it right to introduce Garo Hills, the land of the Garos or Achuks, and the language that they speak, that is Garo language or Achuku. The tribe is of Tibeto-Burman origin and follow the matrilineal tradition, that is property and surname passed through the female line, while the overall power pertaining to family and kinship remains with the head of the family or the father and the other male relatives. The Garo or the Achuku word for pandemic is Sajinma-Sagop. It is basically used for epidemic, but that may be because the word never needed to be used or to be brought into use in a cosmic global sense, as there was no need. In earlier times, before the advancement of this very convenient media, when people in a region got epidemic, they knew only about their own sickness in their own place. Probably they would have been too occupied with their own sickness and death around to think or wonder whether other people in other parts of the world were suffering in the similar way. The Achuks or the Garos call this sickness that spreads very fast and causes many deaths as Sajinma-Sagop. It is a combination of three words, Sa, Jinma, and Gop. Sa means sickness, illness, disease, pain. Jinma means crowd, multitude, large number of people. And coming to the term Sagop, Sa again stands for sickness, illness, disease, pain, and Gop means total, complete, in toto, inclusive, etc. So Sajinma-Sagop stands for huge crowd from within a community or the whole community succumbing to the same sickness, one after the other, or at the same time, and the resultant mortality. This is a brief explanation for the term Sajinma-Sagop. I would like to acknowledge and appreciate a resource person, Professor Casey Baral, for having suggested that we insert the local term for pandemic, and that's how we have come to have the theme Sajinma-Sagop pandemic, COVID-19 and culture. I would also like to add that the Achuks or the Garos followed a very strict code of conduct during Sajinma-Sagop. Each village is sealed either empirically or symbolically. No visitor is allowed and no one is allowed to visit outside the village. Within the village, there would be restricted movements, less visits to the rivers and streams, and total abstinence from agricultural work or collection of firewood or plantain leaves from jungles. They disposed of the dead as quickly as they can. There are times when the sickness overwhelmed them and there were more deaths than survivors. In such cases, the village is set on fire and abandoned, and the abandoned village is never re-inhabited. And by and by, a new village is created. I'm mentioning this regarding the Aceh Ogaros because we are going to be hearing about COVID-19 and culture. With the situation aggravating during this pandemic, the whole world has been in a sort of communion, silent though most of the time. We feel that there is a kind of cosmic vibe circulating. I think we all can feel it, a psychic. We know that we are here to listen to the deliberations on the theme Sajinma-Sagop, pandemic, COVID-19 and culture, and learn from the expertise of the resource persons which they will be sharing with us. We will get to know more about the resource persons by and by. But for now, it gives me immense pleasure to say, and also nostalgia, that Professor K.C. Baral makes me think of my postgraduate days in Shillong and the kind of knowledge and learning that we still cherish, which we received from him. Well, when it comes to Professor Jyotirmoy Pradhani, we are proud to call him our teacher, guide, our friend, or be associated with him in some way. I had the pleasure of speaking to a few of the participants before the webinar, and my heart literally jumped. It's a national webinar turned international one. Yes, we all know that. But I get the feeling that, that there is that ambience, this setting and scene. It's evening time and we say, chalo, chalo, come on, let's get together for a round of discussion. We are happy that the resource persons have also had a share and contributed and helped to spread the word about this webinar. Not in that patronizing way, like, register in the webinar of Don Bosco College that is being organized by Don Bosco College, Tura. I will be speaking there, not that way. But I feel that we all feel good to come together. And with great respect to the scholarship, erudition, and experience of Professor Baral and Professor Pradhani, I feel somewhere there is that sense of, come, let us come together for a round of drinks. Drinks and the goblets will soon be filled by the resource persons. I hope and wish that the intake of this drink shall inebriate us, shall intoxicate us to learn more, to read more, to do more, and to respond more. With this introduction, may I invite Reverend Father Vivan Rodriguez Mukim, Principal, Don Bosco College, Tura, and the advisor to this international webinar on Sajinma-Sagop pandemic, COVID-19, and culture to deliver the formal welcome address and thereafter to read a book on COVID. Father Vivan Rodriguez Mukim.
Thank you, Dr. Barbara S. Sangma. A very good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of Don Bosco College, Tura, I would like to welcome each and every one of you to the national webinar on Sajinma-Sagop, pandemic, COVID-19 and culture, organized by the Department of English, Don Bosco College, Tura. As I welcome each and every one of you to the webinar, I would like to express my sincere words of thanks to all those who made this webinar possible. I place on record my sincere thanks to the Department of English, Don Bosco College, Tura. I would like to particularly mention the name of Dr. Barbara S. Sangma, Head Department of English, and all the faculty members of the department, Dr. Sister Lucy R. Marap, Father Abhilash Vijay, Ms. Tengme K.S. Marap, Genia K.S. Marap, and young Kitina Goldiva, the Sangma, and other staff members of the college. I would like to thank the resource persons of the webinar, Professor K.C. Baral from the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, and Professor Jyotirmoy Pradhani from the Department of English, Northeastern Hill University. Thank you, dear resource persons, for sharing your expertise at this webinar. I would like to express my sincere thanks to the technical team of the college, Sri John Satish and Sri Javelin A. Sangma, who made all the arrangement for this webinar. To all those who lend their technical support to the webinar, I would like to sincerely thank you all. Don Bosco College is situated in a hill town of Tura in western part of the state of Meghalaya. The college was established by the Salesians of Don Bosco in 1987 to serve the cause of higher education for the people of Garo Hills in particular and Northeast India in general. The college is considered as one of the prestigious colleges in the place where educational institutions are still few in number compared to its counterparts at Shillong and other towns of Meghalaya. The college, during the time of the lockdown due to COVID-19, had conducted 3 webinars and a 2-day international web conference with almost 1,500 participants from 17 countries. There are other webinars in the pipeline to be conducted by the other departments of the college. And this is possible only with the collaboration and the dedication of the faculty of the college. I wish this webinar success. As you know, all industries in the entire globe are suffering badly because of COVID-19 outbreak. The entire business world was shaken due to the sudden downfall in the economy, which is the result of the lockdown. I believe in saying that there is always something good in bad. During this period, we have also learned from Mother Nature that we should not take natural resources and this earth for granted at all. The way nature is healing itself, as per various reports published in newspapers and the media reports, is clear indication to us that we human beings are the only responsible greenhouse effect, deforestation, and spreading poisonous vestiges through rivers and many more factors. Due to rapid industrialization, we have started living in an artificial place made by concrete and cement called a villa, luxuries, hotel and offices, shopping malls and restaurants. But how can we neglect Mother Nature? After all, whatever we are constructing is surrounded by nature, and we do not have any escape if it presses the restart button to fix all changes made by human. I am not against development, but it should not happen at the cost of nature, else this is only the trailer. As we take part in this webinar, may it help us to understand this pandemic and how we can change or adapt ourselves to the new normal. Once again, I extend a warm welcome to all of you taking part in this webinar via Zoom or YouTube. I thank you for registering for the webinar. We have few international participants from Canada, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Bhutan, as well as our neighbor Bangladesh. As I conclude, I wish that this webinar help us to understand the situation that we are now and how we can live with it and overcome it. Dear friends, I would also take this opportunity to release a book of poetry with the title String in the Lute by Dr. Barbara S. Sangma at Department of English, Don Bosco College, and published by Papyrus, Guwahati, 2020. This is the first complete poetry book in English composed by a Garo. We congratulate Dr. Barbara S. Sangma for composing the poetries. I would now release this book, and those who are around, kindly clap your hands. Once again, congratulations to Dr. Barbara S. Sangma. Thank you, God bless you, and have a wonderful webinar.
Thank you, dear and Reverend Father Vivan Rodriguez Mukim, for your words of welcome and for having released the new book on poetry, which happens to be a complete poetry in English by any Garo. Earlier, there have been already books on poetry, but they were of mixed nature, bilingual, either translated from Garo or in some other way. So once again, I thank Father Vivan Rodriguez Mukim for having done the honors. Before I call Madam Tinkme, I would like to inform our esteemed participants that you may leave your comments in the chat box. And as we begin to listen to a resource person, if you have got any query or any clarification to be made, you may leave your queries, you may leave your doubts in the chat box. We will be collecting them, and we will ask the resource person at the end of his speech on your behalf, and we assure you that you will be getting your answers. Now, I would like to request Ms. Tinkme Sangma, Assistant Professor, Department of English, to introduce our first speaker for this international webinar.
Hello, everyone. A very good evening and welcome to the first session of today's international webinar on the theme Sajinma-Sagop Pandemic, COVID-19 and Culture. It is apparent that the theme has the right tone and is appropriate for the ongoing current situation, as the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has been felt globally, affecting all walks of life in personal, social, and commercial contexts. I, Tinkme Kemarak, Department of English, Don Bosco College, take this privilege and pleasure to introduce our respected speaker, Professor Kailash C. Baral. Professor Kailash Chandra Baral superannuated from the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad in 2019 after a long career spanning over 41 years. A former higher administrative grade professor of English and India Studies and Pro-Vice Chancellor of the English and Foreign Languages University, he is currently the Vice Chairman of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies, Kolkata, under the Ministry of Culture, Gaul. Professor Baral has authored, edited, and co-edited 10 books and has about 50 publications in national, international journals and anthologies. His work, Theory After Derrida, was relaunched by Routledge as South Asian edition in 2018. His edited volume, Earth Songs, Stories from Northeast India, published by Sahitya Academy, is translated into Hindi, Kannada, and Bengali languages. He was a member of the Sahitya Academy's National Jury for Bal Sahitya Pushkar in 2014. Presently, he is visitor's nominee to many universities. He was a recipient of Narendra Pradhan Award and the British Council Fellowship. And today, he will be sharing with us his expertise and ideas on the theme pandemic, COVID-19 and culture. So without any further ado, I invite one of our speakers, Professor Kailash Chandra Baral, to take his precious time and speak on the theme. Over to you, sir. Over to Professor Baral.
Hello. Hello.
We can hear you, sir.
Where is Barbara? My PTP has to be inserted. Hello. 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 Good afternoon to everybody. Hello. Hello, Barbara.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Could you insert my PPT?
So I'm trying to call her.
No, she has responded, but where is the PPT?
Speak there. Madam, speak there.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
No, the PPT
Hello?
has to be inserted. No, the document has to be inserted, isn't it?
Yeah. It's
We are sharing.
Anyway, good afternoon, everybody. Actually, I thank the coordinator of this international webinar, Dr. Barbara Sanma, for inviting me. I also thank the principal and other colleagues of Don Bosco College, Tura, for their support to this particular webinar. It is interesting that we are holding this webinar on a topic which is very unusual for the English department. However, the background and the introductory note that has been given by Barbara actually justifies that why this particular webinar is organized, because this particular pandemic has really affected all our lives in a very deep way. And I was really impressed while I was trying to putting up this particular paper. I was at a loss at the beginning what to talk about. But I found that there has been so much material available on this particular area of study. I was really very much gratified that I accepted this invitation to share my thoughts with the participants. I understand that there are many international participants also. It is good that actually in these difficult times, it is good that we spare some time to share our thoughts, talk between us, and that would provide some kind of remedy to the seclusion, the suffering, and at the same time to the loneliness that has been imposed on us. To start with, as you know, Barbara has given that Achik word for epidemic, and also has given the social response to such kind of epidemics. When people die, what kind of restrictions are followed in a village, and when it goes out or beyond their control, they have to finally burn down the village and move to some other places. Now, as we understand, an epidemic is an infectious disease that breaks out in a community, in a particular geographical area or in a limited geographical area, while a pandemic spreads out across a wide swaths of a geographical area, across countries and continents, having a global spread. In comparison, the effects of both varies in degree in that an epidemic becomes a pandemic. As you know that she has used a Garo word, Garo expression. Similarly, in most of the Indian vernacular languages, as well as also in Sanskrit, this is called Sankraman. And that is Sankraman is epidemic, which is contagious, infectious, which spreads very fast. And it's a actually uh, deeper impact is described as a Mahamari that in English is large-scale deaths. And moving on, let me talk about death, disease, and the human world. As we understand, large-scale deaths also occur because of natural calamities, such as earthquakes, floods, and cyclones. It is not that deaths occur only because of pandemic. However, among man-made ones, war has been the single most reason for many deaths. That only diseases don't kill, humans also have invented something called war that also kills large number of people. Disease and death are inseparable. There is an unbroken continuity of diseases with human societies. Among all kinds, the contagious or infectious diseases caused either by bacteria or virus are instrumental for large number of deaths in a short time. They are non-human origin pathogens, and coronavirus or COVID-19 is one such virus. Please move to the next one. Yeah, this is the picture of coronavirus. Now move to the next one. The virus in the picture originated in the Wuhan city of China and spread across the world, so far affecting over 29.4 million people, of which 21.2 million are active cases, and deaths stand at 7,55,000 as on August 15th, because it is still increasing and the numbers should go up, are incidentally going up every day. So far, there is no cure available, although a number of vaccine candidates are in the process of development. The virus has caused large-scale economic downturn, job losses, and resulted in uneasy lockdowns, adding to our daily anxieties. During the ancient times and through the course of medieval period, epidemics or pandemics are considered as a god's wrath to punish the humans for not following the righteous path. Diseases are attributed to divine origins, as in case of smallpox in India. Goddess Sitala was considered as the anthropomorphic personification of the disease of smallpox. In Hindu belief system, Goddess Sitala both causes and cures high fever, rashes, hot flashes, and pustules. All of these are symptoms of smallpox. The supernatural origin of diseases or epidemics is also widespread among the tribal communities. Instead of attributing the cause of sickness to a god or goddess, they attribute any kind of sickness to evil spirits with different names. In both cases, a goddess or spirit needs to be pacified to overcome the crisis. The rise of medical sciences during 18th, 19th centuries had helped to eradicate the misconceptions about diseases. The vulnerability of the human body was attributed to the deficiency in human immune system. Therefore, the treatment of or fight against any epidemic rested squarely on strengthening human immune system that could fight back any bacteria or virus. All vaccines are developed to strengthen the immune system in such a manner that the body could resist the disease. But in most cases, our efforts do not succeed. If we find a vaccine for one, a new virus appears and brings life to its misery. It is interesting to note that the evolution of disease and its understanding have taken different forms in different cultures, starting with the divine wrath to an imminent end of the world. Now, as you know, this end of the world story is very interesting. And there is a huge literature available about this, what I call the apocalyptic imagination. Apocalypse, as we know, is a Greek word, apocalypse, meaning revelation that has come to existence, extensive use in Christianity. There were other means of revelation, such as oracle and testament. Its structure gets articulated in the form of a divine spirit speaking through a human agent, or the human agent giving testimony of divine revelation through divination, either through a speaking voice, a dream, or in some other way. From this basic understanding developed two very important streams. One is the historical apocalypse, and the other one is the astrological apocalypse. Historical apocalypse was an account of a post-event, as history is actually looking back of past events, or what happened after. But astrological apocalypse is predicated to a future event. A historical apocalypse has many layers as it is a post-event, particularly with the discovery of the new worlds and subsequent history of colonialism. Disasters, calamities are considered as a race-specific or climate-specific. For example, leprosy was considered to be a disease specific to Asia's hot climate zones, in which Indian subcontinent figured as a hot spot, whereas plague or flu were of European origin, called as white man's disease. Indeed, some people were very vulnerable to these climate geography-specific diseases, for example, malaria for the Europeans or plagues for the non-Europeans and the colonial subjects. It is interesting, but before I proceed forward, let me tell you something about this apocalyptic imagination. As you know, Nostradamus is known to most of you, that he has predicted about disasters in the form of earthquake, other natural kind of calamities, and it seems some of it have already happened because his first wife and children, they died of a plague. Similarly, because his book, which book of predictions, which came up 1515 or something, that is during the 16th century, you will find the similar type of texts were also composed by some Bastamite saints from Orissa, and those texts are called Malikas. Malikas are actually the astrological prediction or the prediction of the future disasters to visit us. Whether we believe it or not, actually the credit has to be given to the human ability or the human mental ability to foresee the future and what kind of disasters are awaiting for us. When we talk about, the colonial period perceived disease in a different way. One of the perception of the colonial world was that because the territories they have colonized, they had different kind of climate from their home country. Now, this is where you'll find that because of this, the Britishers, looked at the climate-specific kind of diseases, for which, they started an institution in Kolkata for research in tropical diseases which are indigenous to India. And they also tried to find out some kind of treatment, not basically for the local people, but for the Britishers during that time. And for this, there are two very good examples of that. One is the leprosy colony. There is a history about the leprosy colony in India, that this leprosy colony has to be outside the municipality area, because during those days, it was believed that leprosy is still contagious, which is not. And one more important thing is about the sanatorium system, that is how to actually address the problem of tuberculosis, or the patients of how to give some kind of relief to the patients of tuberculosis. You'll find there are so many sanatorium, isolated places in good climate areas, and this sanatorium system is also British gift. And I was surprised to see that I went to a city in Maharashtra called Nasik, and there is one area, a large area of Nasik has been actually given to sanatorium. And there are no sanatoriums now, but everywhere you'll find that there are houses, there are places there, and it was actually meant for the afflicted white tuberculosis patients to go and recuperate in those places. Now, this is what I'm trying to allude, is that disease was also not considered universal. It is climate specific, it is people specific, and there is also an undertone of race with disease, that diseases were also racialized. Similarly, diseases are also meant for segregation or separation. I will come to that later on, but here what happened, that exclusion was the policy, in that the Sikh used to lose some of the privileges that the healthy enjoyed. The same policy continued in independent India for some time after we are supposedly overcome tuberculosis and find out that leprosy is non-contagious. Now, this is where I bring in, please go back to biopolitics slide. Please go back. Yeah. Actually, this is the point, that the whole culture of disease has actually part of what we called biopolitics, the politics of the body, the politics of the healthy bodies and the sick bodies. The whole concept of disease revolves around the politics of body, and it's controlled by the state. And this has been a very important area of study these days. Michel Foucault considers biopower as modern and productive, fostering life and letting die. This affirmative productivity distinguishes it from sovereign power, with which it today coexists, whose negativity is expressed in the formula kill or let live. In Foucault's, actually, when we talk about Foucault, what he has actually talked about the body, he has brought around what is called, a kind of a materialist genealogy. And in his materialist genealogy, biopower is considered as productive. In this sense, the diseased cannot contribute to the productive resources of the state, hence disposable. This is very sad that the diseased is separated or considered not to be a productive agent for the state. And thereby what happens is, as I have already told you, that the diseased actually is deprived of certain kind of privileges that a citizen is granted. Foucault further elaborates on this and offers 4 methods. That is, one is medical intervention, that is also controlled by the state, and the administrative supplement as palliative care in hospital or hospice. That is, again, hospital becomes an institution in which the medical intervention takes place, problematizing sexuality and race. I'll come back to these 2 aspects. Pandemic sexuality, or sexuality that is threatened to have spread some kind of disease, and also how disease has become implications of racial discrimination. And it has a legal kind of dimension in which sickness, suffering, whether a suffering person, a sick person needs some kind of judicial protection, or he should be left alone to suffer. And this raises a very ethical question before the state, whether the state should actually protect the diseased, or the state should actually abandon its responsibility. Now, there is another thinker, the Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben, on the other hand, acknowledges the Ardentian, I'm talking about Hannah Arendt, and the Foucauldian thesis of the modernity of a biopower, but claims that sovereignty and biopolitics are equally ancient and essentially intertwined in the originary gesture of all politics. Sovereignty is the power to decide the state of exception, whereby bare life or Joe is exposed underneath political life or bias. Example he has given about the Nazi killing of Jews. Let me just simplify this, what Agamben is saying, that Foucault is talking about the body and the politics of the state. But actually for Agamben, when it concerns biopower, everything concerning biopower is political. That a particular group of people, for reasons of sickness or otherwise, that is of race or community or religion, are separated. That is what happened to the Jews, because the Jews are considered not pure Aryans by Hitler, and they need to be exterminated. They are objectified and destroyed. Similarly, that a sick body is considered very often as a disposable, as if there is no dignity of that suffering person. He could be disposed of because he doesn't contribute anything to the productive system of the state. Following Agamben, we can say that state plays an important role in objectifying individuals or communities as enemies, controlling bodies of citizens from pollutants in the name of race, gender, and disease. This broad thesis could be reconfigured in the colonial mechanism of control of diseases or lack of it. Next. Colonialism not only mapped a territory under its rule, that is the administrative territory, but also designated some of the territory as a topography of a disease. The topography of a disease indeed is an extended metaphor for colonial spaces. The description suited to the climatic conditions and local disease patterns. India in particular was a tropical country, hence described as hot, humid, having too much rainfall, and a place of constant decomposition. And if you look at these metaphors, you can understand that the decomposition is not related in a colonial discourse as the source of regeneration. Instead of that, decomposition is considered as the source of dirt, uncleanness, and the source of, germinating germs. That is the way of looking at decomposition in the climatic condition. Colonial imaginary was always built on its own contradictions. They hate the climate and the people, but like the land for its resources. With the climatic condition, the racial prejudice got consolidated to describe the Orient as a land of monsters, diseases and vices. Yet, that is the contradiction I'm talking about. Yet, a space of desire. The colonial desire manifested in differentiated mechanisms of control of resources and also bodies. Because when we are talking about colonial bodies have been objectified in various ways. And you will find that in the discourse of Foucault and Agamben, you don't find a reference to colonial bodies. Now, therefore, if you look at colonial bodies from the colonial perspective, colonial bodies are ugly, diseased, sick, they could be disposed of, and they should always kept at abeyance. Next. But coming to the point of a colonial desire is or was a very complex and enticing phenomenon. On the one hand, the colonial enterprise was anchored on a romantic sense of adventure to explore and control the unknown. On the other hand, to degrade and destroy the native cultural life by destroying the local knowledge. Maybe a sense of fear always goaded the colonial psyche. One such fear was the fear of the unknown diseases. Next. Colonialism could be seen in different ways. One of the ways of looking at colonialism as an exchange. Colonialism was not only about control, but also about exchange. And it brought the world together in an unprecedented movement of products and ideas. In this exchange, the most devastating exchange was the diseases. The tropical diseases afflicted the white people, and the white man's diseases also afflicted the native people. Colonialism itself was like a contagious disease launched through contact, self-multiplication, and destructive measures. Next. However, the rulers had to protect themselves from diseases and natives. This led to creating enclaves only for Europeans with cantonment boards for defense establishments, notified area council for civil lines, or municipalities to manage sanitation among other activities. Although the British were segregated, the government could not control, because this background I'm giving to you, that how the first act, epidemic act, happened not because of any kind of, epidemics, but for some other reason. That is what I would actually refer to what I said earlier to colonial sexuality. Although the British were segregated, the government could not control the sailors and soldiers who went out seeking sexual exploits with the native prostitutes. That gave rise to a STD, that is sexually transmitted diseases, in the form of syphilis and gonorrhea. To protect these wayward pleasure seekers, the colonial government brought out the first, what is called, regulation for disease control. Next. The first Epidemic Act. Now this is very important, that the Contagious Diseases Act was passed to regulate colonial sexuality in 1868. Now the first, Epidemic Act that was brought by the Britishers in 1868 was only to supervise or try to control colonial sexuality through the intervention of the government. It resulted in regular inspections and forceful confinement of Indian sex workers so as to prevent European men from being exposed to venereal diseases. The colonial rulers, who were not concerned for the health of the natives, tried its best to isolate, quarantine people to protect Europeans from the so-called local diseases. This is where I would give you another example, that is the second Epidemic Act actually was passed in 1897. This is on the wake of a plague in Bombay. Now, some of the clauses, some of the measures that are included in this particular act, very interesting, that the government has the full power, to actually forcefully, if necessary, take up the houses of people where plague was there, or burnt those houses and take out the people from there. And these are very, very severe type of, government intervention that came along with plague. What I'm trying to say is that the Colonial Epidemic Act was equally ruthless on the local subjects. And at the same time, the same law was not applicable to the white people. Incidentally, the white people were instrumental bringing or getting the plague onto the Indian soil. Now, it is ironical that we are following some of these epidemic acts even today. The police surveillance that goes on during the lockdown period is actually one leaf from the British law. And we have not brought up with any new law. We are still following the British law. Next. Ironically, many communities were wiped out from the world, being exposed to the white man's disease, like the plague, influenza, typhoid, etc., and the most recent ones being, AIDS. Besides the exclusive European diseases, the white man was also instrumental spreading, say, Asian or African diseases to non-Asian countries. As a result, a large number of indigenous population was wiped out in North and South America. Next. Now, let us look at disease and the post-colonial state. Most modern states have taken the responsibility of the health of their citizens because a state needs a healthy population to be economically productive. The state can procure best treatment for its citizens. Hence, many colonial laws concerning contagious diseases were either modified, squashed, or recast to meet the emerging needs of healthcare. Next. Most of the post-colonial states have done fairly well, depending on the resources they have in the field of healthcare, either through prevention, that is vaccination, sanitation, awareness, etc., or through treatment, medical infrastructure, medical education, and insurance, etc. Yet a lot more has to be done ensuring people's participation in a movement like the Swachh Bharat mission and awareness drives on inoculation, childbirth, and mother's health care, etc. Next. Now we are coming to the main discussion of my presentation. The title of my presentation is COVID-19 and its social impact, social cost of man-made disasters and pandemics. Now this is a very important to think about is that, in the face of pandemic, and as such, the pandemic itself also has a cost. Now it has economic cost, it has so many other kind of cost, healthcare cost, whatever you call it, but there is also a kind of social cost. Now, along with economic and infrastructure, there is always a social cost of both man-made and natural disasters. Economies can recover, sure, and infrastructure could be rebuilt, but the dead cannot come back to life. This is a kind of loss to the society, to the community, to the families, which cannot be compensated. Other things could be redone, compensated, but personal loss cannot be compensated. Deaths create havoc for families. Even survivors face food shortages, struggle with sickness, as we have seen the migration of the laborers and all these things. And still, in spite of government support and all that, people are finding it difficult during these difficult times. Now, there is another phase of a war. War doesn't simply kill, war also displaces people. War creates an inhuman ecology, for people as refugees and displaced with the fractured social solidarities, as seen in case of Syrian refugees running away from the war with ISIS. Now, this is more than a pandemic, because in a case of pandemic, you close in yourself, you stay away. But in case of a war, you cannot close in yourself and stay away. You should move out. That is the call. Now, when you move out to a new area, new place, what happens to you, to your family? It creates a lot of problems. And among all these problems, you will find that the worst victims of a war are women and children. And that is happening now before us in case of Syrian refugees, and how desperately they're trying to move into Europe and what kind of abysmal conditions they're living in. The economic cost of a pandemic is huge. Often it overwhelms the health infrastructure of smaller countries. Of course, humans have been able to find out cures for most of the contagious diseases. Diseases like polio, leprosy, and cholera are almost wiped out, but the fight against some other diseases such as AIDS and cancer are still on. There are new viruses like COVID-19 that keep on affecting us. Next, social stigma is another part of this, and we should be actually aware of this, because it was too much with the AIDS, and now also it happens with COVID-19. One of the major problems of contagious diseases is social stigma. We'll carry the prejudice against the sick as a pollutant who is a threat to the society. Such prejudices have caused many deaths, as in case of AIDS it happened, and many families felt harassed, as evident in the death, even in the present case, of Dr. Silo, a well-known physician of Shillong, who was denied burial in a couple of cemeteries after his death of COVID-19. This is sad but true. Even after death, the dead is not treated with dignity. This is one thing. The society has to ensure that any death of either COVID virus or any other kind of contagious disease should actually deserve the dignity that is due to that dead person. Now, this social stigma, the fear, the fear, the fear, this is sometimes it happens because of the fear of the unknown. Even if we know that COVID-19 could be successfully treated at the early stage with the preventive measures that we are now familiar with, such as using a mask, washing hands, maintaining social distancing, and self-isolation, some unknown fear still haunts us. Could I be the next victim? It is a bother always lurks behind anybody's mind. Frequent lockdowns have taken their toll on each of us. Now, therefore, certain kind of responses, reactions to a dead body, a COVID dead body in your surrounding or around you may create or may actually increase that anxiety or, create that fear more in you. Next. This is where we live in a period, in a time, as I'm talking about the fear, we live in a time of uncertainty. Fear has turned into uncertainty when life is thrown out of gear. Students do not know when will they return to classrooms. Workers do not know when will they return to work. The list is very long. Many people have lost their jobs. In spite of the government support, uncertainty is deepening with every passing day, resulting in an unmitigated crisis that has reduced us to bare life. Next. Next, psychological factor. This is also another thing which could be added up with the uncertainty or the fear factor. The economic cost of COVID-19 is huge, but at the individual level, the psychological cost is massive. It is already in the public domain that India is waiting for an explosive mental health issue. With Corona and in post-Corona times, mental health issues will haunt us for a long time because some of the impact of Corona has been very traumatic for people, and particularly those who are living in mega cities. And obviously, this trauma, if it continues for long, it's not surprising that it creates a lot of mental depression. And mental depression leads to what we call, mental health problem. Next. In a post-Corona world, life will not be the same again. Corona has taken many lives, created emptiness in many people's lives, destroyed economies and families. It might have taught us some lessons. One such lesson is about human carnivorous lust to eat each and every living animal. The reference is to China, as the virus originated in Wuhan wet market, where all kinds of animals are sold for food. Actually, in her introductory remark, Dr. Barbara Shangma has made a very, very good reference that we should not find out, what happened, where it came from. But that sounds very cliche, and that obviously speaks, we are trying to find out somebody for what has happened to us. But that is besides the point. What I'm talking about is a serious problem. Because if you want to eat each and every kind of animal, that may be your choice. That may be your choice. But at the same time, this is also your responsibility to ensure that your problem doesn't afflict others. Next. China has been not only coronavirus, China has been the source of many other viruses, also such as the SARS, a predecessor of corona, and a new virus now circulating in Inner Mongolia side of China, originating from pigs, is on spread now in China. Similar, it has symptoms similar to swine flu, and some people have already died. All these could be related to the Chinese food habits. Of course, I should not sit in judgment, but I think we must have a holistic look at, nature has produced what humans can eat and what humans cannot eat. That is also protection of some kind of species that they ensure us what is called the food chain in a natural condition. If we go on mindlessly, go on hunting and eating all kind of things, obviously there will be disruptions and the disaster like so this COVID-19 will follow. All these could be related. Of course, one may exercise his or her freedom to eat whatever one likes. At the same time, as societies, we need to be equally responsible to others as carriers of diseases. Next. Pandemics like the bubonic plague, what is called the Black Death, and the Spanish flu happened during pre and colonial times when the world was different from the times of COVID-19. And the war against corona has not been easy in spite of all our scientific advancements. The politics of COVID-19 is more disastrous as world bodies fail to act responsibly to make the world a safer place. Next. Now, during this time, as I have told you at the beginning, I have given you some examples of the idea for biopolitics and the state. Actually, the idea for biopolitics and the state is that the state is sovereign over the bodies. You know, the state can decide what will happen to human bodies. And one of the very fearful aspect, the way the bodies could be also battered, or the bodies could be also a kind of what is called a bait in a kind of conflict, in a situation, war conflict. Now, if a country decides to, bring in a biological weapon or, creates a kind of a biological war against another country, that is almost equal or similar to a nuclear disaster. Of course, in a nuclear disaster, in a flash, many people die, but think of a biological warfare that it will kill people in a miserable condition, and at the same time, it will cause a lot of suffering. I'm not saying that nuclear war is better than this, but what I'm trying to underline here is the human mind is so weakened that it always invents ways how to kill other human beings. Now, whether it is a nuclear or whether it is a biological warfare or whichever way, humans keep on doing these things, how to kill humans. Now, whatever nature is doing in comparison to that, you will find nature is less cruel than humans to humans. Now, with this kind of background, the biopower politics and all that, what is happening now, I thought I must bring it to your notice. This Giorgio Agamben, the great philosopher of our times, he is 80 plus, and he's an Italian philosopher. He was very uneasy with these lockdowns in Italy during the COVID-19 pandemic. And he wrote an essay, and the title of the essay is Coronavirus and Philosophers. And in this essay, he is very critical of the state, that is state of Italy, of measures it had taken to contain coronavirus, thereby reducing human existence to bare life. He uses this expression very frequently, bare life, that human life is reduced or denuded of everything that is human. You just live there or exist there with a name, with an identity, without having any human function. Some other thinkers also have responded to the situation. And Slavoj Žižek, I think most of you must have heard his name. He feared that the old barbarism with a human face may emerge through ruthless survivalist measures enforced with regret and even sympathy, but legitimized by expert opinions. I think Žižek is somewhere closer to what is happening now. If you transfer the words of Žižek, the management or control of the epidemic, it happens in our country like ICMR has a panel And these people give the opinion how the disease should be controlled. Now, this is a very interesting way of looking at, the powers that be with some institutions who actually intervene in our lives. Of course, maybe in most cases for our good and welfare, but the mechanism that he is saying that sometimes it may so happen that it is actually helping you, but imposing a kind of barbarism of the old type. That is how he looks at. Next, Jean-Luc Nancy from France. Yeah, all these people are beyond 70s. I think Zizek is 76. Nancy is around 72 or 73, has taken a more affirmative view in saying that the crisis may result in the emergence of new solidarities, and the viral magnifying glass could even enlarge human contradictions and limitations. Of course, human contradictions and limitations will be always there. There is nothing new about it. But the emergence of new solidarities, that is very important. Now, what Nancy has said, you will find that we are also conforming or affirming to some new solidarities, like the COVID warriors, this expression, doctors, nurses, police people, those who are fighting or helping to fight us against the coronavirus. They are, so dear to everybody. Now, we are actually in respecting them. We are believing in them, which we were not doing earlier, in pre-corona times. Now, this is where you will find that the doctors, nurses, and all these people are no longer called doctor, nurses, and all that. They are constituted into a new solidarity. They are called COVID warriors. As our external borders are protected by our soldiers, similarly, the human borders are also protected by these COVID warriors. Therefore, the word warrior is very apt for them. While the philosophers' words are on the daily battle of the scientists, the philosophers actually battle with each other. There is a daily battle that is being fought by the scientists and doctors. In spite of the debates and sufferings, today humanity has more faith in itself that corona could be conquered. Next. Lessons from corona will change our lives forever. We may have new work culture, learning system, conferencing as we are doing today without meeting physically, thereby surrendering to technology to conduct our lives. But a warning is already written on the wall. Is the technology going to be the new monster? Maybe, may not be. I leave it to your judgment. And before I conclude, I want to offer a poem offer this poem hoping for a better tomorrow. Next. Yeah. This poem is written by Laura Kelly Panusi, and the poem goes like this. When this is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger, full selves at the store, conversations with neighbors, a crowded theater, Friday night out, the tests of communion, a routine checkup, the school rush each morning, coffee with a friend, the stadium roaring, each deep breath, a bearing Tuesday, life itself. When this ends, may we find that we have become more like the people we wanted to be, we are called to be, we hoped to be, and may we stay that way, better for each other because of the worst. Thank you very well for your patience. And if you have questions, I will certainly address those questions. Thank you again.
Sir, thank you. This is not a formal vote of thanks, but yet I would like to thank you. It's a wonderful session. Now, the first point I would like to make is there are a few participants asking you to share the PowerPoint presentation. If you give me permission, I can forward them from my...
You cannot share it because the document is not properly done. There are certain mistakes because I am not good in this technology. I revised it, but while I was presenting, I could find. And there are disjointed things, you know.
Okay,
but
sir.
it will go in my
So,
name, my fear. That when if people need a full article, it has to be reworked. Do you get my point?
yeah, okay, sir.
But is interested to publish something, I have to sit down a couple of days and work over it. Well, I have just given some hints because there are certain things which need to be elaborated because a presentation has a limitation. No? There is a time limitation. And a publishable article will be totally different. Okay.
Sir, on behalf of the participants, I feel there is a great interest in the presentation. They would really like to have the whole paper. If you can give to us.
No, that you have to give a couple of months time because my hands
sir.
are tied with other things. That if you come up with some kind of publication, I will certainly do that.
Okay.
But it has to be recast because PowerPoint and a publishable article, they're totally different things. Because here you are dealing with the templates. These are the points you're dealing with. You are not writing on them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll put just two questions from out of the 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. I think I shall combine them. Sir, how do you compare the severity of COVID-19 to the other pandemics in the past? And what, according to you, to your observation, is the main problem posed by this pandemic 2020 in cultural perspective and context? One is severity.
I have spoken about the cultural context actually. That is why I read out that poem. That is also product of the culture. You know, people are looking inward. What has happened to our lives? How you have said at the beginning that the world was moving very fast, and suddenly there is a roadblock, and it has forced us. It has jerked us back. You know, it is something like that to look at our own situation, our own human condition. That is one, but it has ramifications regarding environment. It has ramifications regarding other things. But what this particular pandemic or epidemic or disease has disrupted, you know, which is very terrifying, is that it has disrupted the most intimate, you know, urge of humans to be together in a family, in a gathering. You know, that is a kind of very, you know, as a society, we are a society of association, you know, group association. Individuals make groups, and groups within groups you associate, then outside groups also you associate. You know, that is how societies are built. Without human association, there is no society. Do you get my point?
Yes.
And COVID has disrupted that. COVID has disrupted that. Okay. You cannot come close to somebody. You cannot give a pat, even your own relative. Suppose I am coming from outside, even if the government is very kind to allow me home quarantine, for 14 days, I will stay away from my own people inside the same house. So not dividing people from outside, dividing people within.
Yes.
You see, that is the thing. That is the cultural thing. And severity is a state of mind. Okay. My point is not how many people get cured now in India. Almost around 70% people are cured. That is not the point. The point is the people who died, because this is an unexpected disease. You know, you have never expected this disease, and suddenly somebody dies. And what happens? Can anybody feel in that emptiness of that family, their near ones? No. Even if few people have died, they have left behind some kind of memory that they died of a pandemic. That is where the stigma, the kind of negative implication comes in. And second thing is, look at the kind of suffering people are going. They go to hospitals, they're refused this, that, so many methods of control. This has made life otherwise very difficult, very difficult. You go to bank, you go to a grocery shop, you look at the daily life, because I don't know, maybe your life is much easier in Garo Hills, because I stay in a metropolis, life is very hard here. See, you get things, there is no problem. But negotiating, you suspect your driver. My old driver had COVID. Now I start suspecting myself. Of course, he was not staying and not driving me for last 1 month. Now that is what I'm saying, that the most intimate spaces have been disrupted. See, you started suspecting your own. Thoda cough ho gaya, kasi ho gaya, re kya, somebody, my wife or my children, have they got it?
Yes. So shall we go to the next question?
That kind of uncertainty is more dangerous. That you are not sure of anything. That COVID-19 has brought into the fore. Okay.
Okay, I'm moving on to the next question. I think we can take one more. I'm reading verbatim here. The response by states towards an attempt to control diseases or anything unwanted is underpinned by a supposedly utilitarian approach. What is your take on this statement? This is from participant.
No, actually, the state, as I told, I have made it very clear, because the state wants to. I have told you that the diseased and the sick becomes unproductive, unproductive force, and they could be disposed of. Therefore, the state doesn't, because there is a case. Many cases have fought in the Supreme Court, and what happens is there is a contradiction with the state itself. The state segregates people, isolates people, and creates a situation where a person could be marked that you are so and so. As you know, during this COVID kind of thing, people are given stamps. You have to quarantine or not quarantine. Look at this. This state is coming on your body, that this body is mine. I can give a stamp here to identify you, whether you have run away from the quarantine house. Look at this. It's almost like a jail, if you look at it in that way. And the second thing is, state doesn't allow people for voluntary death, anesthesia, which is, voluntarily to die. The Supreme Court has not allowed. A man is like a vegetable for years. He wants to die. And here the state says, because we do not give life, we cannot take life. Look at the contradiction here. On the one hand, you are facilitating people to die. On the other hand side, you are taking a moral high ground, saying that we will not allow people to make, death by choice or voluntary death, euthanasia. So this is the position of the state.
Okay, sir, thank you. Now over to Sister Lucy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for watching an informative session. Sir, you have, with your expertise and experience, dealt at length and systematically on the topic Sajinma-Sagop, COVID-19 and culture, focusing on the origin and history of the epidemic in Indian culture. You have enlightened our minds and broadened our views with regard to the pandemic and its effects on society and culture. We hope that remedies will be discovered soon to overcome this pandemic and that all people may avoid social evils like social stigmatization and overcome the fear of the unknown and uncertainty. Once again, sir, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Jyotirmoy Pradani to you. Good evening. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Jyotirmoy Pradani to you. We are honored to have him here today for this international webinar organized by the Department of English, Don Bosco College, Tura. Sir Jyotirmoy Pradani is a professor of English at NEHU Shillong. He is also former head of the Department of English at NEHU Tura campus. He has published extensively, which include Creativity and Conflict in the Place of Sam Shepard, Culture, Ethnicity, and Identity. A reader, Madhupur Bahadur, translation of award-winning collection of Assamese short stories by Sheila Badra, published by Sahitya Academy. His interview of the renowned Afro-American scholar, Professor Simon Gikandi, was published by the Journal of Contemporary Theory. His recent journal and book chapter publications include Unipolar Food Paradigm, Questioning the Meta-Narrative of Food Fundamentalism in India, published in Man and Society, a journal of Northeast Studies, Orality, Historiography, and Literary Imaginations, the Interfaces of Narratives. In the Clarion, Longing for the Lungta, the Abiding Echo of Tibetan Collapse and the Loss of Home, in Kaushik Barua's Wind Horse, included in Writing from India's Northeast, Recovering the Small Voices, edited by Dvijen Sarma, Interlinkages and the Cosmopolitan Spaces in the Narratives of India's Northeast, in Cosmopolitan Spaces, Indian Literature and Counterpoints of Modernity, edited by Malasri Lal. His areas of teaching and research interests are theater and performance studies, translation, Northeast literature, indigenous studies, et al. He was also the founder editor of the research journal Protocol, Journal of Translation, Creative and Critical Writings. This Land, These People, Rajbansi Poems in Translation is one of his forthcoming books. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Yes. I thank the Principal Don Bosco College, Reverend Father Rodrigues Mukhin. I thank Dr. Barbara Sangma for having invited me to this webinar. I also thank Dr. Lucy Marak, one of the organizers of this particular webinar. And I also welcome all the participants who have logged in to be there this evening to be with us for this webinar. I take this as a kind of a major opportunity for myself because I have been able to share screen with one of the major luminaries of Indian academia, Professor K.C. Baral. He is one of my philosophers, one of my guides, one of my teachers. I've learned so much from him. In fact, today morning we had a telephone conversation for some time. And even that particular conversation, though that was just for a small moment, I had learned so much from him. This is indeed a great pleasure to be here in this particular webinar today on Sajinma-Sagop pandemic, COVID-19 and culture. Sir Baral has in fact quite elaborately dwelt upon the past, the present and future of COVID in a very large kind of a context, in the whole human context. I would like to draw upon some of the areas that I have tried to understand, tried to gain my understanding of this COVID crisis. And also, at the same time, I might be referring to some of the names which Professor Baral has also referred to, but try to figure out and find out what could be the other mode of reading of this particular COVID-19 crisis. Let me begin with one small anecdote that happened way back in December 2019. One of my students, she came and she would be carrying her sanitizer in her hand, and she'd be all the time wiping her hand. And all the time she'd be worried. She would be telling that, sir, what happens if COVID comes to Shillong? And she had a reason for that. She thought that if somehow this COVID, at that time it was not COVID, it was coronavirus. If corona manages to come out of Wuhan or China, the first place it would hit would most probably be the northeast of India. She had a reason for that. She thought that since northeast is quite close to China, so if at all it comes out of China, the first place it would hit, of course, is northeast. And she would be always carrying the sanitizer. In those days, of course, sanitizer was mostly as a kind of a fashion accessories than a serious health item. Now, when this coronavirus rather manages to come out of China, instead of coming to northeast, is going a few thousand kilometers away. And whatever is the coronavirus theater that the world has witnessed, they've witnessed through Milan. From Wuhan, it happened in Milan. Now, this particular incident, this particular trajectory of this particular virus given a kind of a notion of distance and proximity. What is distance and what is proximity? Now, physically, geographically, northeast is closer to China, but northeast does not get affected in the beginning, though. Italy is far away from China. China and Italy happened to be the first one to be hit by COVID or hit by coronavirus. Now, this particular epidemic has given us a sense of new redefinition of distance and proximity. But at the same time, we also have to understand how we now measure distance in the context of the post-digital era. Now, there's a reason to believe that had it happened in the pre-digital era, perhaps the spread of coronavirus, the dimension of coronavirus, might have been proportionately limited. Of course, there might be some debates, but there is also a reason to believe that way. The way the WhatsApp messages now circulates in one moment to various other kind of zones, this virus also attains a similar kind of a character, like that of a digital character, and it truly becomes a true post-digital virus or post-digital ailment. Now, in the Indian context, when we're afraid of coronavirus, the month of January, or even the February, or even just before lockdown, or during the lockdown, our fear had a different kind of a character. That character was very much like that of watching a horror film inside the cinema hall. The fear is real, but we are at the same time conscious of the fact that the cause of fear is ultimately just illusions. When in India, we're playing on the utensils, we're waving our mobile phones, mobile lights, or when we're looking up the sky, looking at the fighter jets showering flowers, we had this kind of a fear, which is mostly driven by excitement and thrill rather than real apprehension of an ailment coming to our way. We thought that it was happening in Italy. It did not come this far to us. But now we have seen that how this particular virus can come so fast to any corner of the earth. So that is a new kind of a realization of this present human civilization. used to happen in science fiction or a Hollywood kind of flicks, but we have now witnessed a real kind of spread of a disease happening at a very fast manner. The way even the Facebook messages or even the WhatsApp messages spread from one corner to another. Now, this particular COVID has redefined our notion of proximity and distance, and also it has exposed us to the paradox of distance in the post-digital era. Now, in fact, what Sar has said that when dealing with this COVID-19 from the English literature perspective, what kind of things do we really have to speak about? Now, while going through, then I have also realized one thing. In fact, this particular virus has provided us a kind of a field, a real field, to apply our theoretical understanding of issues. Now, many would be very much excited to apply ideas like state of exception of Agamben. Of course, we can apply discipline punish of Foucault. We can apply also Althusserian notions of state apparatuses of repressions. But this particular COVID crisis has not been as easy, even theoretically. COVID crisis is definitely a major health crisis, the biggest crisis so far in the 21st century. It has engendered a major crisis health-wise. Also, it has engendered a crisis at a different level, and it has also emerged as a theoretical crisis. Why it is a theoretical crisis? Let me give you a kind of hypothetical situation. Imagine, instead of China, the first corona outbreak occurred in the US or the UK or any one of the Western European countries, and then it proceeds to the east, to China and other Asian countries, the so-called developing or the post-colonial nations, or the global south. That is, from the Western capitalist metropolises, it travels to the global south. In that kind of a scenario, it would have been much easier for us on our part, relatively, to apply theory with much confidence and ease. As students of literature, students of critical discourses, we could have used terminologies like neo-imperialist paradigms, capitalist invasion through disease on the global south, or even the post-capitalist penetration of virus to invent new markets for the pharmaceuticals. This kind of idioms we could have used, but it cancels out because the geography of this particular corona is slightly different. But then the problem arises. Apparently, it has originated in the East, a communist country that too, and has caused an epidemic in the capitalist metropolis. So this is almost a kind of reverse Orientalism or reverse Scythian trajectory. Now, among the top 10 nations as the worst hit by COVID-19, at present, there are among the 10 nations, on top, of course, is the US. On the 10th slot, that is Spain. In between, there are 8 countries, and all of them are from the global south. After the US, it is Brazil, occupying the 2nd slot. India as the 3rd slot, followed by South Africa and Russia. Russia is also ideologically or discursively part of the global south. Modina Tlastanova is a major global south philosopher from Moscow, including other countries like Peru, Mexico, Colombia, and Chile. So these are the 8 major countries, the first major countries hit by coronavirus. Now, therefore, the smooth theoretical proclamations in the context of the COVID outbreak turns out to be somewhat tricky, turns out to be somewhat problematic. Now, in the Outlook magazine, there's an Outlook journal on capitalism. There's an essay called "Capitalist States Failed During COVID-19 Pandemic. Where is the failed state theory?" The young writer Bhavani Shankar Naik, who teaches in the UK, he writes that the COVID crisis had drawn the categorical conclusion that this COVID-19 crisis had irrevocably established the failure of the capitalist states, including the US and the UK, and underlined the triumph of the communist states. He had said that it's the communist states who had actually managed it well. And he had given examples of China, Vietnam, and Cuba. Now, but then the people who have remained skeptical about the Chinese official data, we do not know, it's only hearsay or some kind of speculations. And also, such absolute conclusion that only the communist countries have done well becomes problematic if we look at the data of other diversely governed countries like Taiwan, Myanmar, Bhutan, Cambodia, Fiji, Mauritius, Laos, New Zealand, and some other who have also done exceptionally well when it comes to managing this COVID-19 crisis. So therefore, the only argument that the only communist countries have the capacity to manage a mega human crisis is an untenable argument. So this is another kind of a theoretical crisis. But the question is, which is the most ideal, effective, and efficient form of governance in terms of managing the challenges emerging out of unforeseen human crisis? What actually be the pattern of our political and cultural life post-COVID? What would be the character of pedagogy from now on? For all this, we do not have any ready answer. Let us try to understand the scale of disruptions that COVID has legitimized in terms of a set of protocols, what Sar has already spoken about. That is notably in the present context, we have certain parlances which are doing the rounds. The three major COVID parlances are social distancing, quarantine, and containment. And significantly, all of them have isolation and forced solitude as a common implication. Sar has spoken about, Michel Foucault has also spoken about quarantine, while speaking about the plague towns in the Middle Ages. He had described quarantine as a strict spatial partitioning, which was the early form of panopticon, his famous theory on surveillance. He had defined quarantine as a segmented, immobile, frozen space. Each individual is fixed in his place, and if he moves out, he does so at the risk of his life, contagion or punishment. That is, if you are out of quarantine, there might be two possibilities that might happen to you. Either you are contaminated by the disease or you would be punished by the state. So there's the only two options you have once you are out of quarantine. So COVID-19 has actually exposed us to a classical Foucauldian paradigm that individuals are subjectivized, quarantined, or what he has defined as spatially partitioned, constantly monitored. If any violation occurs, anyone goes out of the demarcated space, he will be subject to either contagion or punishment. And Slavoj Zizek, one of his articles on COVID, he had titled his article as, to give it a modern dimension of this quarantine, instead of discipline and punish, he has titled his article as Monitor and Punish. Monitor, all of us are now subjected to this monitor when we have experienced how we have also been monitored. The question is, could we afford a response to COVID-19 without any provision of quarantine or containment or even social distancing? The answer is obviously no. This is a necessary evil. Now, here again, I'll also refer to George Agamben's, in the wake of COVID-19, what he had written. He had said, and of course, he has made a few interventions. He had spoken about state of exception as a normal paradigm. He had spoken about biosecurity. Also, he has spoken about requiem for the students. Now, Agamben, Italian philosopher, as Sar has already said, but why it is important that he's an Italian philosopher, and he was the first one to say that coronavirus, famously, also infamously, he had said that coronavirus is actually a common flu, ordinary fever, which he said the state has converted into the most ideal context for the full operation of the state of exception as a normal paradigm. He writes, this disproportionate response to coronavirus was due to the growing tendency to use state of exception as a normal governing paradigm that state wants to be repressive, and that's why they have invented coronavirus in order to operationalize that state desire. He also went on to say that coronavirus is a normal flu, not much different from those that affect us every year. He had called this as an alleged epidemic. And of course, when he had said this, we may not agree with him. And when he had said made this particular statement in the month of February, the World Health Organization, or WHO, did not come up with this particular terminology called COVID-19, nor even calling it as a pandemic. But George Agamben's this particular statement provoked sharp responses. One of the responses is that, the major banner, it says that Giorgio Agamben's coronavirus clueless. The Italian philosopher's interventions are symptomatic of theory's collapse into paranoia. It's a major kind of charge against theory. Now here I can recall the PMLA editor and one of the major Afro-American critics, Simon Gikandi, in the interview I had taken, he had made a very interesting statement. He said that critical theory is useful when it is critical. And while referring to the post-colonial, the complexity of post-colonial, or a kind of ambivalence of post-colonial theory, he had said that theory kind of became afraid of contexts. somewhat this particular statement becomes relevant in the context of Agamben as well. However, Agamben's statement has some relevance in our context. I'll come to our context now. We have one term now, quite familiar, that is SOP, the so-called Standard Operating Procedure. In the context of COVID, as a mode of exception cannot be ruled out in our case how, SOP has both a social and moral legitimacy and difficult to defy even if there is obvious discriminations. SOP, we have to follow it. And if we do not follow it, then of course we will be judged as a kind of aberrant citizens or irresponsible citizen. Let me give one example. It's a very interesting example. In June 2020, there was a crisis of the BJP government in Manipur. Congress and BJP, they have similar amount of seats. So either BJP or Congress could form the government. So immediately, Congress MPs, Gaurav Gogoi and Ajay Maken, they went to Imphal. As soon as they arrived in Imphal, they were quarantined. So they were inside the hotel rooms. The same crisis, in order to tackle the same crisis, two another leaders went from the northeast. One is Himanta Biswa Sarma from Guwahati and Conrad Sangma, Chief Minister of Meghalaya. They also went to Imphal. When they arrived at Imphal, there was a red carpet for them, and there was no quarantine for them. So this is the kind of discrimination happening. One set of rules for the Congress MPs and another set of rules for the ruling BJP MPs or leaders. Now, who can regulate if there is any misuse of SOP? The answer is none. No authority, be it scientific, medical, or even judicial, can provide a strict manual on who is to be quarantined and who is not to be quarantined. After all, one can't be sure unless those 14 days are over. So that is the trick. Now, who has the right to apply the quarantine mandates? Who can really apply these things? Obviously, the state. And quite significantly, it is the ruling regime who has the moral key to operationalize the quarantine protocol. I'll give another example of Mamata Banerjee, who, of course, BJP, she's from the opposition side. When in her state, the central observers came to inspect the COVID preparedness of the state, then what Mamata Banerjee's government did, they threatened them that they would be quarantined. So what they did, as soon as possible, they left Calcutta. So this is a unique apparatus of regulation, apparently fortified by moral and ethical warrants, against the misuse of which there is no defense mechanism apart from crying foul. You can say she is dying, she's not doing right. Only that you can say, but you do not have any other defense as such. Now, one can safely guess that this SOP will be very religiously followed by almost all the state governments now who are facing now assembly elections in 2021. Now, this is a kind of a situation which can be defined as a biosecurity regime. Now, COVID in a very significant way, of course, has altered some of the core aspects of healthcare. And Agamben has picked up one particular word. He has picked up this word from Patrick Berman, which he has used in 2013 when this COVID was not in the scene. This term is called biosecurity. Agamben has used this very strong word to define this situation. He says that it's a health terror in the worst scenario. And what is biosecurity? How biosecurity regime actually operates? Biosecurity is a kind of a mechanism through which we organize citizens to submission to the state norms. The citizens would follow every state norm and institutions, and they would transform into what he has said, superlative good citizen. And the obligations will be propagated as altruism, the pure moral code. If you follow it, you are a responsible citizen. If you do not follow it, you will be a irresponsible citizen. In the process, what happens? A citizen loses his right to health. He no longer has a right to health. Rather, he has a juridical obligation to follow the state norms to health. And thereby, there is no health safety. Rather, there is biosecurity. That is the new regime now we're actually in. This is the predication of the SOP also. This is how the SOP is also operating. You have to follow this particular norms, this particular rules. Now, coming back from health to the more pedagogic and educational scenario. Here, of course, Agamben has also been quite rather nihilistic. He said that apart from the prospective collapse of safety or the right to health, he has spoken about the prospective disappearance of students as a physical entity. About the future of education, especially the life of a student as a learner, Agamben has a very grim kind of prophecies or grim kind of statements. He points out how the element of physical presence, so crucial for the relationship between student and teacher, would disappear forever. That's a very strong kind of statement. there would not be any kind of physical proximity of student and the learners. It's too nihilistic. Now, who will take over? He says that the technological barbarism, what SAR has ended, a kind of indication. Professor Baral has ended with that indication. Who is a new monster now? Now, there is a cancellation of life of senses where students are imprisoned in a spectral screen, ghostly screen. Now you are watching a spectral screen, a ghostly screen. That is what student and the whole experience of learning will be fixed at. He makes an apocalyptic statement about the future of student. He says, there will be an end of being a student as a form of life. Because learning is not only going to the book, learning is making relationships. Learning is a real-time experience, physical, mental, and psychological. It can occur only through real-time transactions. That is not possible in this kind of online or this kind of a digital transition as such. So, because of the social and physical dimension of learning would no longer be there. That's what he has predicted. But he's also warned the teachers. He has given a major kind of a warning that professors who agree, as they are doing en masse now, to submit to the new dictatorship of telematics and hold their classes and courses only through online, he says, are the perfect equivalent of the university teachers who in 1931 swore allegiance to the fascist regime. So if you insist only on teaching through online, you would be as good as a fascist. That is Agamben's very strong kind of a warning to the present generation of professors or teachers. But whatever he says, whatever the castigations are, we have to accept another reality that this online mode is going to stay. Now, this is on us. How are we going to make it more humane? Now, from Agoti, we can also look at what are the social changes that have occurred in the context of or in the wake of this COVID-19. Now, wake of this COVID-19, one major book was published was by Slavoj Zizek. That was Pandemic COVID-19 Shakes the World, which happened to be the first book on pandemic. It was published on 28 March, just after we were into lockdown in India. Now, what did he say? He had begun this particular book, a very significant statement by Jesus Christ, when Jesus Christ comes out of resurrection and addresses Mary Magdalene, and he says, "Touch me not." Now, let us try to figure out the implication of this particular statement, "touch me not," in the Indian context. New global social ethics of not to touch is not something very unique in India. Not to touch or not allowed to be touched has been deeply ingrained in Indian ethos and the Indian psyche. It is evident in our social gestures, and also it has been the most important condition of ensuring purity of every kind, be it religious, personal, spiritual, moral, or social. Some of the foundational parameters of social ethics in India has been primarily predicated on touch not protocol, because touch is seen in India less as a gesture of affection and more as an act of polluting an object or an individual, a subject, or even a pure space. So on the basis of touchability, social identities have been formulated in India. It has made identification of pollutants through the propagation of a social protocol of touch. This has been a reality in Indian societies. So in the context of COVID-19, there's an abrupt disruption of the conventional protocol of touch not regime of India. There's an effective reversal of hierarchy when it comes to touch now. Well, ironically, the users of the airports who were arriving in the international terminals, they happen to have turned into a major or potential pollutants than the ones who were walking miles to reach their homes from one state to another. And this is the paradox in the context with the touch not protocol. The whole hierarchy of who is to be touched or who is not to be touched has been totally altered. Therefore, despite being a crisis, a certain positive social values also, apart from being, of course, a huge environmental advantage. At least the birds are back to the trees. Now, there's an interesting statement by Irai Hairachi. He's Deputy Health Minister of Iran. He had appeared on TV and he had said that you should not panic about this COVID-19. You should not think about mass quarantine, all kind of good things he had said on TV. But at the same time, he had also said that he was also infected by virus, and so he was on self-isolation. That was the paradox of the situation. But in the process, he made one interesting statement. He said that this virus is democratic and it does not distinguish between poor and rich or between the statesman and an ordinary citizen. So this is a very egalitarian kind of virus, very democratic kind of virus, unlike the kind of ailments what Sar had spoken about, the colonial ailments, but there was a distinction could be made on the basis of race, gender, and also communities, basing on what kind of ailments these people are suffering from. And this kind of segmentation becomes difficult. So I can recall in this context, Paul Robson's song, popularized by Dr. Bhupen Hazarika, a famous song. He says that we are in the same boat, brother. And quite interestingly, Zizek also refers to almost similar kind of metaphor. He says that we are all in the same boat. And he makes an interesting statement that there's a supreme irony that what has brought us all together and promoted global solidarity is through our avoidance of close contact and readiness for self. I repeat this. We're all in the same boat. There's a supreme irony that what has brought us all together and promoted global solidarity is through our avoidance of close contact and the readiness for self-isolation. Through self-isolation, by remaining away from each other, we have developed a different kind of global unity, global solidarity. Now, when Zizek finds about the lockdown, he calls it the totalitarian's wildest aspiration that has come true. And also he says, another statement he makes, no wonder that, as matters stand now, China, with its widespread digitalized social control, proves to be best equipped for coping with a catastrophic epidemic. And he asks a question that, does this mean then, at least in some aspect, China is our new future? That is what, of course, Zizek is a committed Marxist. He had made this particular statement. Now, this is a frightening proposition, I would say. At least for some, again, this would be quite a seductive kind of a proposition. But he has qualified his notion of communism in the context of profit. He has said, today's communists will have to be considered on a global level. It's a coordination of production and distribution will have to take place outside the coordinates of the market. That is, distribution and production must be controlled by the needs, not should be controlled by the market mechanisms. Also, he said that the axiom that America first is no longer valid. But it then creates this particular situation, of course, creates a kind of hermeneutic problematic, for it raises the issue. Are there any qualitative difference of operations between the two extreme regimes, be it left extreme or be it the right extreme? Are they not just the common paradigm of operations and methodologies of governance under two different brandings? In this context, I can speak about, or I would like to speak about, one very interesting event that had occurred in the beginning of this COVID-19 pandemic. That is Dr. Li Wenliang. I would call it Dr. Li Wenliang syndrome. Here's the Wuhan doctor, Li Wenliang. He was the first one to have raised an alarm that there was coronavirus spreading. And since he had told a truth, he was arrested and he died in his hospital bed of this coronavirus. Now the question is, of course, has done a good thing. The question is, can a doctor now tap Li Wenliang, say for example in India as such? If they try to do that, they would be in for big trouble. We've seen how there's one example I can give you, like there's one Assam doctor who had spoken about some scarcity of PPE kits, and he came on his Facebook page, and next day he had this knocking on the doors, and he was accused of having some connections with some ultra-left organizations. That is the kind of situation. In North Bengal, one doctor said that we do not have any kind of protective facilities. There's a lot of problems while treating these COVID patients. And when he has raised these issues, then he was immediately transferred, even a punishment transfer. So this is a kind of Li Wenliang syndrome also happening out here. As in China now, power is exerted in an impenetrable way where nothing has to be proven. One becomes guilty till one is proven otherwise. This is the paradigm now we have been going through. At present, I have spoken about how we have been Repairing the doctors. The doctors are also in a major kind of crisis. If they speak the truth, they'll be in for trouble. So at present, the judicial interventions or lack of it resulting in the perpetual confinement of citizens for eternity on mere accusation is symptomatic of state of exception. If you're accused, you can be there inside jail for ages. And this is a kind of Li Wenliang syndrome of the state. Can there be the possibilities of critiquing or dissenting? If any possibilities? Through COVID, the state has gained an extraordinary authority, having a moral warrant now. Unquestioning obligation to the state on the part of the citizen has been transformed into a grand act of ethical gesture. State has gained a new moral right to impose fresh social and even financial obligations as compulsory moral duty of the citizens, and we have to follow it without any question, which in fact they have done. But rejects has warned that there is no return to normal. The new normal will have to be constructed on the ruins of our old lives, or we'll find ourselves in a new barbarism whose signs are already clearly discernible. The question is, has state really become somewhat barbaric? The slightly milder word, somewhat, state of exceptionalist. We can give two examples here. One is, of course, in case of China, amidst COVID, they have implemented the notorious national security law in Hong Kong. And in India, also have seen almost similar devastating law enacted or in the process of being enacted. That is EIA, that is Environment Impact Assessment 2020. And both indicate how absence of civil society's ability to protect, organize, to protest, provides opportunities to the state to legislate dangerous state laws. This is another offshoot of COVID-19. Now, what is the answer we have? What are the possible way out to come out of, regain some sort of sanity in the state polity or the way we live in as the state citizens? This again, I'll come back to Li Wenliang, what he had said just before dying on his hospital bed. He said that there's one way out to find out, to create a healthy society. We can create a healthy society. And he had given one mantra, one statement he has made, Li Wenliang. He has said that there should be more than one voice in order to make a healthy society. There should be multiplicities of voices in a society, and that becomes a healthy society. He had also spoken about mutual trust. There must be mutual trust between ordinary people and the state. Ordinary people must have a reason to have faith on state, and state must have faith on their citizens as well when they raise some issues. Barna Yu, he was a Hong Kong journalist, he had made one very significant statement, and which is going to become a very significant in the context of the post-COVID dealing with our global realities. He had said, if China valued free speech, there would be no coronavirus crisis. He said it very categorically. If China valued free speech, there would be no coronavirus crisis. Unless Chinese citizens' freedom of speech, other basic rights are respected, such crisis will only keep on happening. Human rights in China may appear to have little to do with the rest of the world, but as we have seen in this crisis, disaster could occur when China thwarts the freedoms of its own citizens. Surely it is time the international community takes this issue more seriously. That's what there is. If some country, totalitarianism is not only bad for that particular country, it will kind of disaster for the rest of the world as well. As we have seen with the COVID-19 crisis, distance is trans-territorial. Any place can be a neighbor even without having shared a border. That's why Edwin Gamson said in different contexts why we need this kind of a crisis, why we need a catastrophe. COVID-19 is definitely a catastrophe. He said that we need catastrophe to be able to rethink the very basic features of the society in which we live in. It has actually opened up various kind of chapters of our present existence. It has given us that much needed distance, much needed perspective to look closely at our own living, our own existence. The crisis has also revealed several fundamentals that constitute the very basics of society. And one is, of course, self-sustaining farming any high technical or highly scientific mode of enterprises. In certain respects, we should not return to normal. That is what we have been speaking about, what would happen post-COVID. And I would say we should not return to normal, at least in terms of ecological behavior. The birds are back to the trees, let them be. They have the right to have the trees around. We have seen how nature actually resurrected herself as soon as man went to the back seat, or man went behind the scene. So it has also propagated one particular fundamental, that is, man is actually expendables. If we repeat our lifestyle pre-COVID, what would happen? We would be condemned to commit the same crime. What Hegel has said, the only thing we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history. Thank you so much. So that is what my presentation is, Barbara. Hopefully I maintain time.
Yes, sir. You're well within time, and then you could have spoken some more also. There are very many beautiful comments about your session, and also a few queries, few clarifications, sir. I think we will go to the queries right away. I feel two questions we can leave out because they are to do with statistics, and then I feel those we can find the answers on our own. I think we don't need your great expertise. Those we can find on our own. Okay. I'll start from the last query. This is, sir, from your colleague, Dr. Famelin Marak. She's asking as to how to address the fear in the young or old minds during this critical situation. Then three more questions, three more queries.
Okay. See, first of all, young are not afraid about coronavirus. Young and the kids, they are not actually afraid of the coronavirus. Actually, the adult, they are afraid of this coronavirus. But what we need to do is, of course, we need to make them aware of the extent of coronavirus, how it might affect them. But one good thing has happened. One terrible thing has happened in case of the youngsters. That is, I can see many of the young kids now, they are not being allowed to come out and play on the grounds. That is a major kind of disruption that has occurred in their life. That is number one. So the whole childhood memory is going to be entirely different for this particular generation. Okay, the kind of freedom they had earlier, now they have a sense of restrictions. But at the same time, this is also true, they have managed it in a very brilliant manner. We must appreciate how they have now turning this corona gear, I would say, this mask and kind of stuff, they've turned into almost a kind of plaything, which I can tell you from my own experiences. That is one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is this: what is this? Pedagogy, the very process of the experience of learning, which is a major kind of disruption that had occurred in their life. Now they're learning through WhatsApp messages, basically. Now, one example I can give about the central schools. Now, KVs, they have one particular central module at this particular moment, which has been run throughout the country. Now, imagine one central module is coming to all the students from all the regions, from all the backgrounds. Now, it has become a huge kind of a task on their part to keep a kind of pace, the speed of the kind of courses coming their way. There is one major sort of disruption happening. And second disruption is happening. They have lost their school life. That is a major, that they're without a society now, within their own parents. And sometimes it becomes now a bigger kind of responsibility for the parents, even to act sometimes that they're a happy family all the time, so that they have somewhat a semblance of healthy living inside home. So that is a major kind of disruption has occurred. And another disruption that has occurred, that many of the students, they've been deprived of online classes for obvious reasons. Connectivity, than kind of economic challenges. Many reasons are there. So that is another kind of major disruption that has occurred. And third disruption is that now one can say that supposing a relatively well-educated parents, they can really complement their studies. Imagine a student coming from a challenging background. He would be really a kind of big kind of a disadvantage now. He would not get the amount of support he could have got had the parents been more proactive. So there's a major kind of disruption had occurred. But in any case, this is going to be a very rich experience for all of them. Once they grow up, they will tell better stories.
So shall we go on to the next question, query? This is, what are some of the democratic values of the people in terms of culture that has been disturbed by this virus, especially in the context of Northeast India?
Yeah.
Shall I repeat?
Yeah, I've got it.
What are some, yeah, you got it.
Yeah, see, disruption has occurred not only in the context of Northeast, it has occurred all over. This is a common human experience. And this is, in a way, the beauty of this particular human crisis. It's the same all over. A true postmodern situation kind of a thing. Now, coming to the democratic values, how democratic values have been disrupted, I would say one thing, that it has a very huge positive impact as well. That is, in terms of environment, I can give you one small example. When first this lockdown happened, all of us had actually taken this quite seriously. And in Shillong, for the first time, the locality where I am, for the first time I started hearing the twittering of the birds midnight, because birds were also clueless. How come there's nobody on the streets? So that kind of situation actually occurred even in Shillong. So there was a kind of one positive thing about this COVID is that environment could regenerate herself. And in Northeast, it has also occurred in a very significant way. That is one. And second thing is that when it comes to disruptions of human movement, it has occurred all over the world, in fact, all over the country. So there was also similar kind of disruptions also occurred in Northeast, which was not completely different than that of the other parts of the country. But at the same time, of course, we might also say another thing. There was in Northeast, of course, there was a kind of major economic impact it had created because of the lack of mobility, lack of transportation that had occurred. And secondly, it had also affected the health sector in a very, very major way because so many people could not access health services during those times. So these are the major human crisis that we had experienced. But at the same time, we must also say, relatively, Northeast has done well in terms of managing the COVID. And this is where less amount of governance and more community participation.
Thank you, sir. There's one more question, but then I don't seem to get it. I've lost it. I hope the person concerned would have found the answer in your discussion now, added discussion. Now over to Yankitina, and from my side, thank you very much, sir. Over to Yankitina.
Thank you, Professor Pradhani, for the very interesting and enlightening presentation. Your revelation on the topic Sajinma-Sagop, COVID-19 and culture was very enriching. And yes, sir, coronavirus has brought all of us together, the rich, the poor, the weak, the strong. We are all in the same boat. I'm sure that all the participants have taken note of your valuable input. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
As we have come to the end of the webinar, I want to take full advantage of this opportunity to thank persons who have directly and indirectly contributed to this international webinar on Sajinma-Sagop, COVID-19 and culture, organized by the Department of English, Don Bosco College, Tura. My heartfelt gratitude goes to our distinguished resource persons, Professor K.C. Baral, retired professor from English and Foreign Languages, University, Hyderabad,
currently the Vice Chairman of Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies, Kolkata, and Professor Jyotirmoy Pradani, Department of English, Northeastern Hill University, Shillong, for making excellent presentations and making this webinar interesting and meaningful. Sirs, we are enlightened with your knowledge and presence with us today. We have participants from all over India, from Bangladesh, Bhutan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Canada. I thank all our esteemed attendees for active participation. I thank Reverend Father Bivan Rodriguez Mukim, Principal, Don Bosco College, Tura, for his enthusiastic support and encouragement to organize this webinar. Father Abhilash Vijay, the Vice Principal, Don Bosco College, Tura, though he couldn't be with us today, he has been supporting and giving in his valuable inputs towards this webinar. I also extend my heartfelt gratitude to our technical team, Mr. Javelin and Mr. John Satish, for their technical support. I thank all the teachers of Don Bosco College, Tura, and I also take my pleasure to thank the head of department, the Department of English, Don Bosco College, Tura, and convener of the webinar, Dr. Barbara S. Sangma, for taking the initiative to organize such an enriching webinar. Last but not the least, I thank the Department of English, Don Bosco College, Tura, for being the steering wheel of this webinar and making it successful. There is a saying, all's well that ends well. And with that, I put an end to my vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yankitina. She's really the pride of Don Bosco College. Being an alumna of this college, she has joined the college now, and we are really proud of her and feel good that she has joined the department. Now, dear and esteemed participants, attendees of this international webinar, the feedback link has already been put out. Please fill it in and then submit within half an hour. The e-certificate for participation in this international webinar will be sent to you only if you submit the feedback form duly filled. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thanks from the side of the management. I wish God's blessings to all of us. Let me repeat an old Irish blessing. I think it is needed in this time of crisis. That is, may the road rise to meet you on your journey, dear and respected resource persons, and the wind be always at your back, dear participants. May the sun shine on your shoulders, and may God hold all of us always in the palm of his hand. Thank you, and bye-bye.